Titi Lokpayani Fowoshe is a lawyer and development consultant who joins us on the news this hour for more on this development. Zani Fowoshe, thank you for joining us. Federal government appears to be under pressure now to be able to strike a new deal with organized labor in the next 7 days. What do you think must happen differently amongst all of the parties involved?
Sorry, can you come again? I didn't get that.
Asking what you think must happen differently in the next 7 days where these parties must come up with a new minimum wage.
Well, I am looking forward to NLC and TVC and organized private sector being given realistic and tenable figures that the federal government, state government, and even leaders of the private sector will be able to work with. I'm looking forward to good faith across board. I'm looking forward to every party on that negotiation table looking at things from the angle of what works not just for themselves but for the average Nigerian people, and what would also work for Nigeria at the end of the day. So not just bogus, huge figures, not just big naira figures, but what would work, what won't cripple our economy, what every Nigerian, including the civil servants across the federal civil service, state civil service, and even operators of small and medium scale would be able to work with. Because at the moment, considering the inflation rate we have in Nigeria, we have to be very realistic and diplomatic with whatever it is we want to work with as the minimum wage.
Labour has now made reference to the situation in Angola, where government kick-started $120 as minimum wage on the 1st of June. They say Nigeria is a bigger oil-producing nation. How far do you think government has to go this time?
Well, this is Nigeria, and we have to learn from history. We remember what happened pre-2015 election, when about 9 states could not even pay and were owing salaries to the tune of about 110 billion, and until when President Muhammadu Buhari had to infuse about 1.57 trillion as bailout. Before, even after the bailout, some of them could not clear the backlog. I mean, looking at statistics, let's use the most recent one given by budget as an example. Today in Nigeria, 11 states, only 11 out of 36 states can confidently, independently pay salaries without waiting on FAC allocation. 66% of states cannot pay salaries without federal government allocation. In fact, we also know from the budget statistics that some of these states would have to, even after they get allocations from the federal government, the FAC allocation, even after they get it, even with their projected IGR, they will still need about 566 billion to add to what they have to be able to pay. Where would they get the 566 billion from? Now, let's even move that aside. The minimum wage is not just for civil servants at the state and federal level. We're also looking at minimum wage covering the private sector. At the moment, there is an inflation. There is a skyrocketed price of raw materials and what have you. Private sector are still grappling to be able to keep their staff. So if and when, let me use the word if, TUC, NLC do not bring a tenable price, it's not just going to be about them alone, but about the survival of our nation, Nigeria. It is our Nigeria, not just Nigeria for the sake of optics, of Nigeria for the sake of reality and sustainability. So, thank God that there is they called off the strike for 5 days. But I am hoping that when they get back to the drawing table, they are going to be calling figures that everyone would be able to work with. We do not want situations where people will lose their jobs. We do not want a situation where we are going to have a cyclical inflation, where we dole out the money and then at the end of the day, people's purchasing power reduces. We want a Nigeria that works for all. And I'm grateful for the empathetic stance of the federal government and the state government. Of course, even at the moment, the 2019 minimum wage has not been effected across board. So what is tenable, what is realistic is what I am hoping that all the parties at the negotiating table will work with.
When you say empathetic stance of the federal government, Labour has also questioned the sincerity on that part. The figure it initially brought to the table, I think, was 48, increases to 54, and now we have arrived at 60. They are saying even the 60,000 naira is not up to what government was paying as early as February, when it was giving 35,000 naira wage to workers. The big question here is, what do you consider a living wage vis-a-vis what federal government was offering prior to the nationwide strike? I understand your position on inflation. The last month, I think it was 36%, right? It also means that it is eating into the purchasing power of the average Nigerian. Do you agree?
Very well. I think we need to step these things down. I want to go a little into academics. Let's look at the whole essence of minimum wage from the wage fund theory as propounded by John Stuart Mill, that when you take the cumulative of funds and you divide it by the total number of workers, the total wage should not exceed the amount of funds available. And then there's also a theory by Francis Walker, where he said demand for labor should not be determined by what you have on ground, but by productivity. When you pay wages, wages should be after you must have removed your rent, your profit, and what have you. And that is now, we are now coming to what is the reality on ground. And I think the federal government has tried. By virtue of the Minimum Wage Act, we are to review minimum wage every 5 years. And that is why we are at the table at the moment. Suffice to note that 60,000 naira plus is a 100% increase from what we have before now. A 100% increase, not 10% increase, not 20% increase, not 50% increase, a 100% increase from what we have now. And by virtue of what was agreed yesterday night, it's 60,000 naira plus. So I do not think that there is any issue of distrust. I do not think that there is any issue of misrepresentation here on the part of the federal government. I think at the moment it is for TUC, NLC, the private sector to come up with something tenable. It is also on record that at the moment the private sector, the organized private sector, already agreed with what the federal government is bringing on board. Let's also look at it from this angle. If you are demanding for an increase,
wants to actually pay more. But I think we have to continue this conversation on our other news program. Titi Lokwe Adifowoshe, lawyer and development consultant. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.